Hi, it's Mark Swell, Civil Discourse Now. This is December 11th, 2024, and our guest today is Ingrid E Baptista from New York. Ingrid, how are you?
I'm fine, Mark. How are you?
Oh, well as can be expected in our current climate. We're going to talk today some more about 14th Amendment in Section 3. And you've studied that a lot, and you've also been an advocate for enforcing it for this current presidential campaign season. Would that be accurate?
Yes, I like to call myself the amplifier of it.
That's a good way to describe it. Um, right now, so folks understand there where we are. There were several court challenges to Trump's eligibility to be on the ballot in Colorado, Maine, Illinois. I know those three states had, and Maine. Colorado, Maine, yeah. Anyways, those
And
states
Michigan also.
actually.
Michigan was on
I'm
there
sorry.
as well. Michigan was also one of
Yes.
the ones.
So there's several states in it that heard legal actions to not allow Trump on the ballot. One of those was Colorado, that went up to the Supreme Court on a pretty fast track. It was briefed, I think, by the end of January of this year, and oral argument was in February, and the court issued a per curiam decision on what was in March. I think March 24th was what I had. It might have been a couple of days before that.
Mhm.
But the Supreme Court disagreed with Colorado. Now, Colorado issued an order that said he can't be on the ballot because there were 2 days of hearing held, and the courts there determined that Trump was a participant in insurrection. Is that accurate?
Something, yeah, the court did say that. The Colorado State Court did say that. They basically labeled him as an insurrectionist, yes.
And nobody really has disputed that in any legal decision. It,
Exactly.
yeah, and so the Supreme Court per curiam means no individual justice is signing it, but it was issued on a five. It was 9-0 on the result, but there were there were six. I'm sorry. There were five votes for the per curiam decision completely. Then Justice Kagan wrote a dissent. I think it was Justice Kagan, in which Sotomayor and Brown joined, and then Justice Barrett also had a concurring opinion. That her concurring opinion said the court's decision had gone farther than was necessary. The other justices not only said it went beyond what was necessary, but was that decision was giving instructions on how things should be done or more appropriate for Congress to determine. Um,
Yes.
Obviously, Trump was on the ballot, and that was how people voted. Where are we right now in trying to get him off disqualify him for office? I
Are
mean,
you are
yeah,
you asking?
that was more than rhetorical. I mean, I've
Okay.
been blogging about it and talking about it a bunch. What can people do? I mean, first of all, people really need to know that he's not eligible.
Well, that is the first thing that we need to put in a nutshell. It's the fact that he's not eligible. And the only way to really look at it is simple, common sense. It's actually saying anyone who has engaged in an insurrection, anyone that try to overturn our government, should not be working in government anymore. That makes sense. If you try to, you know, overturn this that we've had for 248 years, you cannot just come in and uproot it. You are an insurrectionist. You cannot serve in government again. And I never understood, like, even when I followed that case, number one, I felt that it was poorly argued. The argument was, it was really poor. the Supreme Court just seemed like they were looking for ways to kind of throw water at it, to just kind of make it fizzle away. That's the way I felt, because they made little comments like, well, it's not, the Constitution doesn't say anything about a ballot, doesn't say anything about primaries. And so then I said, okay, so if you want to go that route, maybe it's meant that once the person already is in or is about to go in is when you could be disqualified and removed. Okay, so if you're telling me that we can't do it because it's a ballot issue, you can't do it because it's a primary, you can't just take him out because of that, because the Constitution doesn't say so, well then, now that he is the president-elect, and we know that in 2020 he did incite an insurrection, he did engage in an insurrection, therefore he's unqualified. And that's what we need to start putting out there. It's almost like it doesn't exist. People are acting as though this doesn't exist, or they have this premise that you need to be adjudicated for this amendment to take effect, and not looking at it as a self-executing, saying, no, you do this, you cannot serve. Period. It's not a criminal thing. It's not saying that now you're going to go to jail. I'm taking you out. You're going to jail. No, it's saying that you cannot serve. And I think that's what we need to get back to, that he cannot serve in government again.
Well, I mean, there are people that, and I've spoken, I've told you about people here in Indiana, friends of mine who've said, well, he didn't have his day in court. And then also a couple of people I've spoken to said, well, the Senate found him not guilty in the impeachment trial, but this is not a criminal matter, so double jeopardy doesn't apply. 1, 2, it's not a penalty. And I told you that this morning. I finally realized what you were talking about, that it's not a penalty. And so it's a qualification for office. And so it's not something in which somebody has a due process right to argue why it is that this is not, is somehow they have a right to a jury trial, or all those rights from due process aren't applicable. But another thing, when I was reading things and listening to people, one point that was brought up was, well, they already voted on it before. And this is an ongoing insurrection. I mean, this didn't just end when Trump left office.
Yeah, it's still on. It's still on. Yeah, it's still on. Literally, it's still on. The fact that he's denying that he lost 2020, the constant repeating that, he's going to go after these people that did him wrong because he actually won 2020. The insurrection is still on. It hasn't stopped. And that's what makes it more crucial. It hasn't stopped.
And when I also think about how he's talking about what he would do in office as far as getting revenge, I'm concerned that there are people who would say, well, okay, now both sides have something that's right, so let's just walk away from it. That somehow we prevailed in 2020, even though he said it was rigged. So let's just give him 2024, which is bullshit. But also, once he's in office and he's a dictator, people aren't listening. A dictator dictates. That dictator will tell them what is the law. And as much of an idiot as he is, I mean, he can say, well, I'm president now, 2020, toss it all out. Anything that Biden's done is void. And who's going to say no? He's in the Oval Office.
Yes.
And I think that's a real problem. I also think that when people look at this, people don't even know that section of the Constitution existed until the last couple of years.
Yes. I mean, I found myself in many spaces where I was criticized. Who is this woman? Is she an op? She keeps talking about the 14.3. What's this 14.3? And she's saying that he's unqualified. Who is she? And it's almost like It's there. So I had to, maybe I said, maybe I feel differently about the 14th Amendment, only because the fact that I am a woman of color. I'm also an immigrant. And it's the only amendment that actually defines citizenship. And for Black people in this country, that's the amendment that made them citizens, meaning you could vote. I like to tell them that's the reason I became a citizen, in order to vote. So when you have this amendment that is so, I mean, the five sections in this amendment that covers pretty much also due process, and it takes you back to the Bill of Rights. It's almost like it's to me, and how my teacher Miss Jackson phrased it. It was like the supreme. It was like the supreme amendment that brought into the fold Americans, those that came here to be Americans, and now have something in that amendment that says if you go against our government, you cannot, participate anymore. And it makes sense. And it
We're
makes a
gonna
lot
end
of
this
sense.
segment and be back here in a minute. We're Ingrid Baptista and I are talking about Amendment 14, Section 3, and we'll be back in just a minute. Okay.